Welcome back, Pokemon trainers. I'm Lou, once again joined by Maeve behind the mic here at Game 4 of 5 of our broadcast on Saturday of the Victory Road World Cup of VGC, sponsored by GG Tour Metafi and El Gato. I got all three that time. I'm proud. I've improved. Maeve, how are you doing after your little break?
I'm good. That is a super interesting match that you guys got to cast. Reshiram is one of my favorite, and personally, I think it's underloved, restricted from this format.
I agree.
I had a lot of fun using it in the World Cup Open, in the Worlds Open a couple of weeks ago. I did not do very well, but I really enjoyed it. I used a version of one of the top 8 teams from, I think, the Madison Regionals this year, which I really, really loved. I think it's a Pokemon that once you get those boosts, it's a tank. It's impossible to knock out. If you get it in the sun, I think it's just a Pokemon that I think is undervalued as a restricted. So it's quite nice to see it on this stage as well. We've gotten to do a couple of different matches with it in the past. With it. However, the players that we have upcoming, one of them we've been able to feature quite a lot, and that is Jiseok Lee from South Korea. And I think that is a player that has proven how talented that he is throughout the entirety of the World Cup. And he's playing Caio Romanini from Brazil. And Brazil is a team that I think has really shined this World Cup as well. I think they've improved on their, they've improved as well, I think, throughout last year. This is that rematch that we spoke about earlier on in the day. And so that rematch, I think, is still really tough. You know, South Korea won 6-1 last year, and South Korea is looking to maybe repeat that with a 3-0 lead over Brazil at the moment. But you know, I think Brazil has such a strong team that it's nice to see them doing as well as, you know, as I expected them to do this year. It's just a tough rematch when you get to this part of the competition.
Yeah, particularly when you're staring down a 3-0 deficit at this point, you know? I mean, if you're Brazil, every single match, every single game counts at this point, otherwise you're going to be knocked out of the competition at this stage. And all South Korea needs is one more win in order to get that advantage. So I think it's really interesting kind of having that mind game coming into this match. Is going to be a lot of pressure for both of our players. But they're both experienced. They've been in, you know, World Cups before. You can see their accolades here as well, with Jiseok, you know, having so many formidable wins over the past couple of years, particularly International Challenge in March. First place from an online tournament. We're playing online here again. So it's going to be that same kind of mindset where you're kind of not face to face with the opponent. It's really just you and your Switch console playing against the game. And I think that's always an interesting mindset to play down against. On the opposing side for Caio as well, you know, World Cup competitor for a couple of years now, and a lot of top 8 finishes in 2019. So they both have experience and wisdom they can bring to this.
Yeah, and both of these players, like you said, they have results that you really cannot dismiss them, right? Caio from Brazil, Latinam International's top 8 in 2019. That was one of the last really big events that we had before, before a lot of things kind of shut down. So it's in Latin America is a team that I think, or is a region that I think you really have to pay attention to, because they are so talented there. And it's such a, the sad thing is that there aren't that many regionals or events in Latin America. So the talent threshold to get through, to get those top results at those events is so incredibly high, because everybody goes to every event because there just aren't too many there. And you know, the South Korean players as well, we saw last year, like we see, they got top 4, which was an incredibly tough top 4. You know, Spain and Italy, and you know, every single team there. It was a really interesting kind of matchup, and the entirety of the South Korean team as well is just so incredibly stacked. Like, there's so many results to draw from I think every single player on the team, that there's a infinitely deep well of knowledge that they can draw from each other.
Exactly, and particularly when we had a little glance at their teams as well, there's a few interesting choices amongst them as well. Loving seeing on Jiseok's team that Venusaur coming back into the fray. Often when we see kind of Zacian and Groudon together, it's that Charizard that comes in and takes that center spot. But it's nice to see the Venusaur making an appearance again with that Venodon core, and having the Porygon 2 there as well for some kind of cheeky shenanigans, particularly the Trick Room gets thrown its way. On the opposing side for Caio, though, it's that Weather War, and I love seeing this with the Kyogre on the opposing side of the field. And the Kartana is a Pokemon that I've been really looking forward to seeing in action. It's kind of fallen off the face of the earth since, you know, 2019, I would say, and then most recently it's kind of been picking up a little bit more uses, particularly as a Dynamax Pokemon.
Yeah, and Caio's team is the same exact six that Gabriel Agati ran, his fellow Brazilian competitor. So there's a lot of talent there. I think there's a lot of great knowledge that he can pull from Gabriel's team and that second place team at North American Internats this year. But I think Jiseok has a really interesting combination, right? Because like you said, this is a real weather war game. There is a lot on each of these teams that relies on those restricteds of Kyogre and Groudon to work at their best, at their max capacity. So I think we're going to see a lot of positional changes. I think at this point too, if you're Caio, you're really happy there's no Gastrodon on the opposite side of the field because you have a little bit more space to kind of move around. You may not want to exactly have, a water spout go into maybe a Porygon 2 because it can handle that pretty comfortably. But other than that, the rest of the team feels pretty safe, except for maybe that Defiant Thundurus, which could put on a lot of pressure as an early Dynamax option for Jiseok's team.
That's honestly the difference I've noticed is the Fire Water Grass core is strong on Caio's side with Kartana, Kyogre, and Incineroar, but it's not as present on the opposing side. There's no water type on Jiseok's team. We've got the Venusaur and the Zacian coming out, however. On the opposing side for Caio, it's a Zacian as well, but paired up with that Tornadus. And this is where the pressure really falls down on that Venusaur. It doesn't want to take something like a Max Airstream, but then Tornadus, not known to be the most Dynamaxing Pokemon. It could just be going for something like a Taunt, trying to shut down any potential substitutes, or Sleep Powders coming out from that Venusaur.
Yeah, Taunt feels like a really easy click here, but the other click that you also would want to make would be something like that Tailwind, right? And if you can't get your Tailwind up, then you're struggling, because if Jiseok is able to get his Groudon in instead of a switch to pair with that Venusaur is going to be moving incredibly fast. And even if it's taunted, it could still go for that Gigantamax, still get that G-Max Vine Lash up, get that big damage. But Venusaur, instead deciding not going to want to take that risk, brings in Incineroar, who is a great option in front of this Zacian, immediately bringing that Zacian back down to that neutral attack and putting pressure as well onto this Tornadus on the opposite side of the field. A Fake Out could break a Focus Sash on the next turn. Icy Wind is actually the move of choice here to slow these Pokemon down, and I think that's going to be really important for Caio to keep his speed up against the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, especially if that Porygon 2 wanted to come in and make some shenanigans happen. Behemoth Blade from the Zacian, though, it is at neutral, so it is not going to be doing that full 75% HP onto the Zacian on the opposite side, brings it down to just under half, but that's still nice damage to get out onto a Pokemon that is so oppressive, and the Behemoth Blade from the opposing Zacian to match is still going to be doing a great amount. Will do more thanks to not having an Intimidate loss here, but it is still a huge chunk of damage onto the opposite Zacian on that side.
Yeah, both those Zacians in a dangerous spot here, particularly as Jiseok's been able to bring in the Incineroar. You can go for a Fake Out to that opposing Tornadus, but you can also apply that pressure with something like the Flare Blitz, allowing the Zacian to be able to deal something like the Behemoth Blade into the opposing Tornadus. The issue, however, is going to be that speed advantage that Caio has been able to get. Since the Tornadus was able to stop the speed of Jiseok's Pokemon, the Zacian could potentially be in range to try and pick up a KO against the opposing Zacian. It did take it down into that yellow zone. It could easily get a KO on this turn.
Tornadus going for the Protect this turn, though, not going to be taking something like a Fake Out or even a Behemoth Blade, like you said. No Fake Out. Oh, sorry, the opposing Zacian also goes for the Protect there. So if there is a Fake Out, it is not going to happen. But no Fake Out this turn. Just going to be a pretty neutral, slow turn at this point. No, the Parting Shot not going to go in as well. And this is honestly the one advantage to using Icy Wind instead of Tailwind, is that you're not feeling like you're wasting any turns by going for that Icy Wind, because there is no risk of it stalling out unless those Pokemon switch out of the field.
I like that thought approach too, actually. Like you said, you're not worried about your turns. You can go for that double protect without worrying about how you're going to set up Tailwind in the next couple of turns. But again, Caio in that strong position with the speed. Zacian now going for the protect, maybe thinking that it's going to be the target of Caio's attacks in this turn. As Tornadus goes for the Hurricane, it will find its mark down on the opposing Incineroar, however. Takes it down to below 50%, doesn't get any confusion, and it doesn't even matter anyway, because Sacred Sword double up is able to get the KO against it. So really great read by Caio here, doubling down into the Incineroar while the Zacian does go for that protect. So unfortunate turn for Jiseok. At least he has the opportunity to bring in a Pokemon from the back now. It is going to be that Venusaur once again, but unless you're going to switch out that Zacian and bring in something like a Groudon, I think Venusaur's in a dangerous spot, particularly if we just saw Hurricane come out from that opposing Tornadus.
Yeah, right. Hurricane is a big threat, especially even if you go for that Dynamax or that Gigantamax. If you bring in something like that Groudon at this point, you at least then continue to reduce the accuracy of that Hurricane, but you're still swapping your Zacian out, and that Zacian's not going to be able to come in nearly as comfortably unless you take another knockout, because without having the pivoting option of your Incineroar to go for things like the Parting Shot into the opposing Zacian, you've put yourself in a little bit of a tougher spot, right? Because this Zacian at 50% HP is not exactly loving the idea of being forced into the game when it, may be taking a big hit, especially with Pokemon in the back for Caio that are huge hitters, something like that Kartana or that Kyogre that can really just do a massive amount of damage. Drought, at least for this Groudon, will boost this Venusaur, who is going to be going for that Gigantamax this turn, and be able to get something like that G-Max Vine Lash off, or even something like a Max Quake, just to try and boost some special defense stats, as you know that Kyogre in the back is probably going to want to come in on a couple following turns to change the weather and slow you down and make you a lot less dangerous than you would be, and you're forcing Jiseok now into a strange position.
Yeah, I love the Venusaur taking control in this match, going for that Gigantamax. Tornadus, however, is going to be like, hey, I've got more speed control tricks. You can use your Chlorophyll ability, but hey, I can also use Tailwind and boost up the speed on that side, leaving Zacian to go first here. It's going to be going for that Behemoth Blade, finding its mark down onto the Gigantamax Venusaur and does a significant chunk of damage to it. It's going to be very vulnerable. Venusaur needs to be able to deal with the Zacian, and Max Quake is the perfect way to do it. This Venusaur really had its choice of target, but I think getting rid of the Zacian, getting it restricted down, and allowing something like the Groudon that's going to have the capability to deal with the Tornadus, when realistically there isn't a lot the Tornadus can do to Groudon, allows the Venusaur the utility to target down that partner Pokemon while getting a special defense boost as well for itself and that Groudon. With Groudon carrying something like the Assault Vest, then it's going to be already boosted up. It's going to be really in a great position to take those special target attacks. The issue is the Kyogre. It's come in now, it's going to reset that weather, bring the rain, and Caio still has the utility to go for a Dynamax. It doesn't matter how many boosts and support you have on the special defensive side for that Groudon, a Max Geyser is still going to hurt.
Yeah, and you don't really, you're with your Venusaur, right? And your Venusaur wants to go for that G-Max Vine Lash. It wants to target into that Kyogre slot. However, this Tornadus is set up Tailwind. It can go for another Icy Wind at any time. It could go for a full accuracy Hurricane right now as well, and may still be able to do enough damage onto the Venusaur to get that knockout, even in this Dynamax. Groudon is not happy. Groudon doesn't want to be here, right? Groudon is probably thinking, is it worthwhile for me to send in my Zacian, take that full knockout so that I can change the weather? But then you can't change the weather again. So you may just have to go, and deal with this damage as best you can. But looking at the moveset on that Groudon, like you said, it's most likely that Assault Vest. There is no Protect on it. It cannot find a way to stall out like this Venusaur can with Max Guard, but there is no Dynamax on the opposite side of the field. So this Hurricane hitting into it, it means you're not stalling out a turn of Dynamax. Water Spout going into the Venusaur will not connect either, but it will connect onto this Groudon, and that is still, even with Assault Vest, that brings it down to just 19 HP. Precipice Blades does not hit onto the Tornadus thanks to its flying type. It will connect onto the Kyogre, which is a great way of mitigating some of that damage from the Water Spout, and brings it down to about 50% of its HP. But looking like this, I think this is probably where Jiseok knows that his game plan has ended.
I mean, that was wild. I know we were saying that it's still going to hurt in the rain, but that was just devastating. And yes, you're able to go for the Precipice Blades and reduce potential Water Spout on the next turn, but I think you would have needed to take it right down to like 1 HP to stop that Kyogre from dealing with the Groudon, because it had such little health remaining. Fantastic play by Caio there, really coming out on the offensive, and that's why Caio was able to take game 1 here.
So here's my thought. My main thought is, if you probably want to move with something, you may want to switch to that Thundurus, because I think bringing in Defiant Thundurus, then you're kind of forcing Caio on the opposite side to play a little bit differently. You don't want to go for anything that's going to lower any stats on that side of the field. However, we didn't see any sort of Incineroar. It was still that Tornadus, but then that Tornadus isn't going to want to go for something like an Icy Wind, because then you're still going to boost the attack on that Thundurus, and then you can at least bring in your Thundurus, possibly have that super effective type damage onto the Kyogre on the opposite side of the field, maybe force it to be a lot less comfortable. You can still even do damage as well onto the Thundurus, from the Thundurus onto the Tornadus on the opposite side of the field as well. Gives maybe that Groudon a little bit more comfort to kind of move around, and maybe, I don't know, I feel like there's just, you may just have to, it's just a tough move, right? Because Caio played it so well by not feeding into the Dynamax bait to match Dynamax to Dynamax, but Kartana is going to be one of the leads here, and that is going to be paired with that Tornadus. It is pouring onto an Incineroar, though, one of the most classic leads I think I have seen in VGC, if you got my time.
I mean, I completely agree with your kind of hot prediction there. I think the Thundurus would make such a difference, not only for the points you've just raised about kind of that Icy Wind, but also having the ability to apply pressure to Tornadus and Kyogre, something like a Wild Charge, would be very dominant. At the same time as well, I think it's nice having that adjustment on the field to take those moves. I love seeing the Kartana come into the fray, though, because Kartana is able to go for some big damage into something like the Groudon. Something like a powerful Leaf Blade is going to be able to bypass the special defense boost that it gets from something like the Assault Vest.
Yeah, and it's probably pretty happy to face down in front of that Porygon too, right? Being able to go for something like a Sacred Sword, maybe just doing a bunch of super effective damage onto a Pokemon that we know is so tough to deal with. And also seeing the Incineroar's item, I think as well, was maybe the Power Brace, so that may be cutting its speed, if I'm not mistaken, and making this Incineroar a bit slower. I'm not entirely sure, but it's an interesting concept nonetheless. And at least, you know, even though you have the opportunity for Fake Out, you can stop this Kartana and maybe allow yourself to get a little bit luckier. But Tornadus switching out here may mean that it doesn't have something to put a stop to it. Kyogre coming in, possibly trying to stop that Flare Blitz to do that 4x super effective damage onto truly the smallest Pokemon. But Sacred Sword into the Incineroar, actually not even into that Porygon slot. No Fake Out as well. Flare Blitz in the rain into that 4x weak Kartana here is still enough for a full one-hit knockout. I was just holding my breath a little bit here, and now you've gotten rid of a big threat on your team and maybe making your Pokemon in the back feeling a little bit more comfortable, not too upset about that recoil damage. Porygon 2 now able to set up Trick Room and make you feel a lot safer in front of this Kyogre.
Yeah, I mean, that Kartana had so much potential. It had the rain support there, but just, you know, Incineroar, there's a reason why it is one of the, well, it is the #1 Pokemon on Pokemon's trainers' teams, because it can be so offensive in that way. It's still got the KO, and now it's sitting down in a Trick Room environment where it can apply pressure to something like the Zacian. The issue is Incineroar does have its HP dwindled down. It doesn't want to face down against Kyogre or a Sacred Sword from the opposing Zacian. If I was Jiseok now, you've got the Trick Room set up, I would use the Incineroar to go for something like a parting shot and try and reposition. But at the same time, in Trick Room, you don't want to be the first one switching out, taking damage. Possibly it's the time to say goodbye to Incineroar, let it go down to bring a free switch into a Pokemon from the back, while allowing Porygon 2 to maybe get us some tricks, you know, reduce the offensive pressure of Kyogre with something like an Eerie Impulse while you're repositioning your board.
Zacian going for Protect here means that there's no hard switch from this Incineroar. It was that parting shot going into that slot that is not going to be able to get that extra drop that you wanted. Eerie Impulse, though, like you said, from Porygon 2, one of my favorite moves that Porygon has picked up in Series 12, because it just handles Pokemon like Kyogre so oppressively, making this Water Spout now be at -2. Incineroar not able to hang on, but Porygon lives pretty, you know, handles that very comfortably, and is still going to allow for it to maybe go for another one, going to force this Kyogre to maybe switch out, allow you to bring in something like your Groudon, who can now take control of this weather and possibly go for something like a Precipice Blades, could even go for a single target attack to try and do more consistent damage, or you could even find now be the time to Dynamax, and that would be a great option to Dynamax this Groudon and start getting those really powerful moves off, get some Max Quakes up as well, boost your own special defense in the face of the Kyogre. You could even try and go for a Max Flare if you're running that move, thanks to, you know, something like this Heat Crash. You've got a lot of options, right? And I think if Kyogre goes for its own Dynamax to match, which it probably doesn't want to do because it's been Eerie Impulse, you're at least in a good state to control the weather a little bit more, even with another Pokemon in the back. Zacian, though, going to switch out for Caio.
Yeah, switch here, bringing in the Tornadus, and I think this is good. You don't want to lose your Zacian in a Trick Room environment to something like a Precipice Blades. You want it for that endgame when Trick Room's over, and you can then start sweeping up KOs that the Pokemon have been damaged at during Trick Room. But it is going to be a Dynamax coming out from Jiseok here, going to be that Groudon. And I do like this adjustment from something like the Venusaur, because Groudon's in its environment right now. The sun is in the sky, it's Trick Room. It can start going for these very powerful Max Quakes, or even something like a Max Flare if it thinks it can catch a KO onto something like the Tornado switching in. You don't want to have a Max Quake, you know, wasting a Max move into a flying type. But Kaio's got plans of his own as well, going for the Dynamax and that Kyogre, and this is a tried and tested scene that we have, you know, witnessed before, Maeve. We have got both of these restrictives, the Weather War, Hoenn Legends here, being in their formidable state, battling it out. It really does look a little bit like the box art of that game.
I actually am wearing a Rayquaza pin today, and that feels like a really safe call. Porygon 2, though, goes for a foul play into the Tornadus. No Eerie Impulse this turn. A Max Flare boosted by the sun, though, into the Tornadus as well. All of this was targeting what was that Zacian, but getting rid of the Tornadus is still a really nice option here, because you're getting rid of a lot of threats of something like Taunt. Max Geyser, though, will change the weather and target into this Groudon, but thanks to the sun and thanks to that Eerie Impulse from that partner Pokemon Porygon, that Water Spout, or that Max Geyser, did very little damage, and that means that even with this sun gone and with the rain boosted, you're really not going to be doing nearly as much as you want to. You can just deal with another Max Flare into that Zacian slot on the next turn, and then even on your final turn after that, you can go for something like a Max Quake and boost your special defense once again. You have the option as well to either go for a foul play into the Zacian, get that double target because you know that there isn't too much going on, or You can, go for another Eerie Impulse if you want to, but I think this Kyogre is kind of a sitting duck on the field facing off against a real sitting duck of Porygon 2.
Yeah, ducks galore while the rain is in town. I think the other interesting thing as well is, Caio's down to the last 2 remaining Pokemon. You can easily go for something in the Max Quake here. You don't have to necessarily go for the Max Flare. You will leave yourself a little bit more vulnerable to something like a Max Geyser, but you got Porygon 2 there with Eerie Impulse to help out so that you have the capacity to be able to take that Max Geyser while boosting up your special defense with the Max Quake and dealing good damage in the rain to something like the Zacian. It is going to be the Max Quake coming down. The Zacian has, of course, protected, so it's not going to be dealing as much damage, but taking almost a quarter there, so it is going to be weakened a little bit more going forward, and unless it's going to be able to steamroll through those protects, Groudon is going to be able to get its victory in the next couple of turns. Of course, special defense piling up on the side of the field in the face of this Max Geyser in the rain. It is certainly going to hit hard into that opposing Groudon, but thanks to the boost of the Salt Vest stacked with the special defense, then it is going to be able to survive. And Gimli has now joined. You guys can't see it at home, but just know he is here.
Gimli agrees. I think that he is much happier with the sunshine probably from this Groudon than the rain. Zacian going for the double protect does not get it. Probably that last sort of attempt there, recover from the Porygon 2 as well, kind of seals the fate here. You're really looking at the synergy between Porygon 2 and this Groudon. You've still got Trick Room up, so you're still moving first, really in an environment that you'd want to be moving first in. Knocking out the Zacian with this Max Quake, you get another special defense boost. You can literally go for another Eerie Impulse on the next turn, bring this Kyogre down to -6, and that is truly an absolute reversal of what game was, right? Caio was able to bring that game 1 in his advantage so quickly because he focused on his own form of speed control, and the threat of, forcing the opponent to be moving second really helped them out. Having the weather and being able to move first with it is what's most important, right? This Kyogre was not able to do anything that it really wanted to do. We haven't seen its full move set. It could possibly be carrying something like that Ice Beam if it had wanted to, but the other move that it often carries is Thunder, so there probably wasn't really any option for it to go for anything other than that Max Geyser here. Groudon has the opportunity to just go for some Precipice Blades, be pretty comfortable, go for any damage that it wants to. You can go for another Trick Room if you want to in a couple of turns. You've got, I think, one more turn left, or no, Trick Room is now ended, so you can go for that this turn. Nothing that this Kyogre is going to do, even at full HP, is going to be able to knock this Porygon 2 out, so it has a really free Trick Room on this turn, just to help to seal the game up. A Water Spout, even at full HP, though, does a pretty nice chunk of damage onto the Groudon, more than I expected, thanks to all of those drops. Precipice Blades does connect on this turn, will target into that Kyogre, does a really nice chunk of damage, even in the rain, and you get this Trick Room up, and you really kind of seal the deal here. You can go for a single target move like a Shadow Claw, just to kind of get enough damage that you need at the end of the day, and I think this is probably going to be curtains for game 2.
Yeah, Groudon and Porygon 2 really have this wrapped up for Jiseok, and I think it was fantastic adaptation bringing that Porygon 2. We love to see it coming out in that turn 0, and I think critically, even though it's not an offensive powerhouse by any means, but being able to go for that Trick Room, allowing Jiseok's Pokemon to be able to move first, and I think critically as well, being able to get the Eerie Impulses off and just keep negating the offensive pressure that Kyogre had that we saw was so strong in game 1, really did change things up dramatically.
Yeah, the threat of Trick Room in game 1, being able to, one, get rid of the Kartana, which I think was, Kartana would not have done well in Trick Room anyway, but getting rid of it before Trick Room really got up, I think was a really nice option, because then you're only dealing with a couple of Pokemon left on the opposite side, and when you get rid of one, you force them to only have one option to switch in and out to try and preserve their weather, and you really did not have a great chance in that turn. Kartana Zacian, though, a double Steel type lead here, Venusaur Incineroar as the opposite lead, so Venusaur is hanging out on this turn. A little bit surprising, because you have to wonder maybe if Caio kind of prepped for it. You can't go for something like, I don't think this Venusaur has Sleep Powder. I think we were able to kind of see those moves in theory beforehand, but I think at this point you may just want to go for something like a Max Quake if needed, or you can go for that Fake Out onto the Zacian on this turn and allow for your Venusaur to get up some big damage or even a special defense boost. But both these Pokemon in the front are physical attackers who aren't loving seeing the Incineroar right now.
Yeah, Incineroar, a fantastic lead coming out here for Jiseok, just being able to throw that Intimidate down against them and put Caio in a difficult situation where he's going to have to make some decisions about whether you need to switch out a Pokemon or whether you have to play a little bit defensively, and that allows Jiseok the opportunity to capitalize on it. You do have your Venusaur out in the front. It's not necessarily the best Pokemon against both of these, but if you wanted to be cheeky and switch in the Groudon from the back, get the Chlorophyll boost, and then notably if you're running something like Weather Ball and Max Flare, that could be critical, and that could really change things for either the Kartana or the Zacian, who would deal, be taking significant damage from it. Incineroar leaves and Groudon returns. I wonder if this is what's going to play out here, Maeve.
I would love to see that it does play out this way, right? Getting this Kartana off the field, you may be trying to force that Weather Ball to target into that slot, which it looks like it's going to now target into the Tornadus, and that is at least going to still do a nice chunk of damage, but it's not the one-hit knockout that you may have been hoping for. Zacian going for Behemoth Blade as well, probably targeting into that Venusaur space as well on top of that, just to try and get damage. You're not a Focus Sash variant, but you're still taking a good chunk of damage from this. You may not be able to survive if you go for a Dynamax, so now it might just kind of be a strange option of do you switch out your Groudon, bring in the Incineroar, try and force it to have less of damage output, and then go for a Dynamax on that turn, or do you try and preserve your Venusaur in the back maybe later when the sun has maybe disappeared, if Kyogre has come in, if you can force yourself into a good solid Trick Room position moving forward. But I think Venusaur is kind of at this weird spot where it cannot go for anything that it may really want to because it won't survive the turn.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not a good Dynamax option currently because, like you've mentioned, it's had its HP dwindled down, and yes, it might be able to get off one big max move, but ultimately you want your max Pokemon to be able to, you know, go the distance, have all three moves doing significant damage to your opponent. So we're going to see the adjustment here as the Incineroar comes back in, and again, I like this. You're putting that Zacian at -1 and throwing down just an Intimidate against the Tornadus for fun. You also then get the Fake Out pressure into that next turn, which I really like. Groudon switching out as well because, hey, Groudon doesn't want to be there with that Venusaur. It needs to be ready to support it later on in the match as Porygon 2 rejoins, and Porygon 2 is smiling in the face of that opposing Tailwind here. Zacian can go for the Behemoth Blade all it wants. I'm not sure which target it's going to be going at down into. It actually finds this mark on that opposing Porygon 2, and honestly, Porygon 2 is so happy right now because Incineroar's on the field. Hey, it can go for that Fake Out into Tornado, stop any potential taunt, and Porygon can just click that Trick Room. And yes, we've seen the Behemoth Blade does very little to Porygon 2. It's going to be sitting in a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean, you have the opportunity for Fake Out, or do you even try and bait it, right? Because I can see you've got the Sun Up. If you can get this Zacian to be really damaged, it's a nice spot, but you may just want to play it safe, right? You're in a weird position where playing it safe may just be your best bet. Zacian may go for something like a Protect just to not take any damage. But even still, in the face of going for a Trick Room, your best option may still be something like a Sacred Sword into that Porygon 2 just to get that super effective damage. But Zacian instead gonna switch out here, bringing in that Kyogre, changing up the weather at least, trying to bait something maybe like that Flare Blitz in the later turns, force you to have to make a weird change. But Jiseok may have the right idea of going for something like a Parting Shot this turn. Hurricane, though, for that full 100% accuracy, looks like you're going for the Confusion, hitting this Porygon 2, and you get the Confusion on this turn. So Porygon may not be able to go for what it wants to go for. Parting Shot into this Tornadus, though, gonna allow for Jiseok to switch this out, maybe bring in that Groudon, allow for a really nice max option as Trick Room progresses, in theory, right? Because now if this Porygon 2 misses the Trick Room, then you're in a really tough spot. This Kyogre is free to do exactly what it wants. It's in Tailwind, it's moving fast, it's at full HP, it won't be in the rain because of the Groudon itself, but you could even just go for a Max Geyser and you can set that rain right back up. You do not have to worry. And this is the moment of truth here, right? This is Porygon. It is struggling, it is trying. It did not get the Trick Room. It does hurt itself in its confusion. So that means that this Porygon 2, who tried so hard, did not get what he needed to get.
I don't even know what that noise was that escaped me in that moment, but like, I wonder if this Tornadus, like, honestly, it's so wild at the minute. I don't know if Tornadus is running Taunt even, and that's why I had to go for the Hurricane, get the 100% accuracy from the rain switch in, and then has to, you know, keep its kind of very moody shoulders and fingers crossed that it's going to be able to get that Confusion. That's exactly what's worked out, and suddenly this fantastic position that Jiseok was in has now been overturned. Kyogre, yes, it's now in the sun. That's maybe a little bit difficult, but I don't believe, you might have to correct me, Maeve, have we seen the full move pool from that Tornadus? Could it be running something like Rain Dance?
It may be running something like Rain Dance, right? I don't think it has that taunt. I think you're correct. I think it's like a weird, I'm not entirely sure. It could be something like that Air Slash that we saw in that last last game a couple games ago. Jiseok, though, is going for that Dynamax. Going to be probably probably that Groudon at this point, right? I think Porygon 2 and Confusion's not going to be the best Dynamax option. This Groudon really does need to sort of muscle through, right? It's going to be moving slower than this Kyogre, so it's not going to be able to get a sort of full boosted Max Flare, because that Kyogre is going to be able to move first. Kyogre, though, not even going for the Dynamax. It's going for a Protect this turn, trying to at least maybe stop something like an Eerie Impulse, if that was maybe the move. Tornadus going for Icy Wind, continuing to slow down, but not the Porygon 2, who, even in all of its confusion, is able to avoid those snowflakes. Their critical hit onto the Groudon, dropping that speed, at least at this point, too. Groudon already knows it's going slower. It's going to stay slow, but these Max Quakes will add up over time, even to this protected Kyogre, because you're getting that special defense boost moving forward. and you're giving yourself probably the best opportunity to deal with this tailwind, even now with those speed drops from the icy wind. Porygon does snap out of its confusion, and it does get the Trick Room up, which is exactly what Jiseok needed, just maybe one turn later than planned. But now, thanks to that drop from the icy wind, you can go for what you need to go for. You can start taking those big hits and big shots early on, get those eerie impulses off onto that Kyogre that is already protected.
Yeah, that Porygon 2 really dug deep into its little blue pockets and pulled out the Trick Room, which was crucial. Otherwise, this would have been devastating for Jiseok. Like you've mentioned, now the Groudon's in a great position to start going for those max Quakes. And Kyogre protecting on that previous turn, I can understand where Caio was going, but the issue is that you're not dealing damage out, and the max boosts are still going to happen for that Groudon, which just means Kyogre's going to have a harder time dealing damage to it in return. Now you're in a position like we saw in Game 2, where the Porygon 2, it's no longer confused. It can go for those eerie impulses and negate the offensive pressure that Kyogre is posing at the minute. The sun is in the sky, so it's already weakened, and there's a special defense boost on that Groudon, and I'm sure in a matter of seconds we are going to have another special defense boost on there too. So it is a little bit difficult for Caio at this situation. I think going for the Dynamax is key. You want to try and override the weather, but at the same time, how are you going to deal with the Groudon, particularly as you're taking those eerie impulse drops? It's not going to be your impulse, however. It's actually going to be a recover from the Porygon 2, which I think is quite wise. It's taken a couple of hits while it was, confused and waddling around on the field as Groudon goes for the Max Quake. And this, again, is going to get the special defense boost down into the Kyogre. It does a significant chunk of damage, particularly as it isn't protecting, obviously, in this turn. And Jiseok just looks to be in such a commanding position, but I'm sure Kyogre will have something to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of match what would be an eerie impulse drop with those two special defense boosts, and this is in the sun, so this is still doing very little damage, right? That Assault Vest Groudon is able to just kind of tank these hits. It's not too worried if the rain goes up because, Groudon more wants to click Max Quake more than anything. Tornado's able to get this Hurricane off at least, thanks to that 100% accuracy from the rain change. Gets another confusion on this Porygon 2, but Tailwind is now gone. Doesn't really matter too much thanks to the couple of turns of Trick Room that we've got left, but Porygon 2 may not be able to go for something like that Eerie Impulse next turn, may accidentally smack itself around a little bit.
Yeah, Porygon 2 once again confused. Tornadus is like, no, that you only had one turn. I'm gonna do it again. You're gonna be in trouble, little duck. You have to, take a back seat. But I really don't think, the Porygon 2 is the Pokemon that needs to be confused right now. If you're Caio, you need to confuse that Groudon somehow. It's gonna be a lot of defensive plays here on Caio's side of the field, just hoping that Porygon 2 is gonna deal damage to itself. But it doesn't. It actually managed to break through and, fail to go for that foul play onto the opposing Tornadus, as Groudon can go for a Max Quake into that Tornadus slot. So, interesting turn of events, nothing happening in this turn, but the Dynamax is over for the Groudon. And now this Kyogre is in a position where even with the boost in the rain, it has command of the weather. Max Geyser is still going to hurt.
I almost wonder if Max Flare into that slot where the Tornadus was would have been better even if you were predicting a Protect, because then you have at least kind of mitigated some of the damage the Kyogre would bring out, and anything that would have switched in for the Tornadus, whether it be the Zacian or the Kartana, wouldn't have been too happy to take it. So I feel like that Max Quake just, there was definitely a play to it, right? Because maybe you were predicting a switch, you were just trying to make sure you didn't get baited out by that Max Guard, but I almost wonder if there was another way that you could have taken advantage of that final Dynamax turn that you had. Porygon gonna still be confused in this turn, but it does snap out of it, does break through this one turn, gets a foul play off into the Tornadus, doesn't do too much damage. Precipice Blades will target into that Kyogre on the opposite side of the field. Won't hit the Tornadus thanks to its flying type, but it does bring this Kyogre down to the bottom 20% of its HP. Max Geyser from the Kyogre, thanks to this rain boost into the Groudon, does enough to, that must have been a critical hit, that must have been to get that knockout, right? Was it not? I'm honestly a bit amazed thanks to all those boosts. I guess it was not, but Hurricane from the Tornadus into that Porygon does not do a lot of damage here, but it is enjoying having that full rain to boost it up.
I mean, I assume that was a critical hit too. That HP bar absolutely snaps down to 0. But, it does just get to show that, it's a big fish in the pond and it's looking very formidable at this point with its sinister grin it does when it goes for those Max Geysers. Literally sends shivers up my spine. But I think that does go to show when you're out of Dynamax and facing a Dynamax Pokemon, you're always at a disadvantage no matter what you've been able to set up. And I think you make a really good point about on that last turn of Dynamax, if it had been a Max Flare, that would have been a very different story. The Max Geyser wouldn't have been able to hit as hard in the rain. And even if it wouldn't have dealt a lot of damage to the Tornadus, it would have been better than the Null and Void Max Quake that happened on that last turn of Groudon's Dynamax. As things happen at the moment, we've got the Venusaur back on the field. Tornadus is just going to go for a Protect here, doesn't want to have to take any more foul plays, because I believe another one will be able to pick up the KO, and Caio just going for the double Protect at this point.
Yeah, Porygon is still confused here as well. So Porygon, it's probably not going to want to deal with this too much. A Weather Ball into that Tornadus. They're timing out, Caio is timing out these Trick Room turns so well. You have to assume that he's going to go for another Hurricane with the Tornadus to target into the Porygon 2 to maybe stop it, especially because now the Venusaur may be slower, especially if Jiseok's Pokemon, that Incineroar in the back, is going to be running slower as well. However, Caio doesn't really maybe need to worry about it. Maybe your big threat is to just take out this Venusaur, because that's the one that would be doing more damage to you if possible. If it's just that Incineroar in the back, which I think you have revealed that it is at this point, then you're not too worried about getting the Trick Room off, because even still you're going to be doing more damage than they can output. Hurricane targeting into the Venusaur this turn does not go through that Protect. Origin Pulse for the Kyogre as well hits into that Protect on the Venusaur, but does connect onto this Porygon 2. So Porygon 2 will be taking the full brunt of this damage, does handle it pretty comfortably. It is, such an incredibly bulky Pokemon. Snaps out of that confusion, does get this Trick Room up, which having this Venusaur go for that Protect, I think, is probably your best option at this point. Rain does stop as well, so you've timed that out for the moment, but Caio still has all 4 of his Pokemon. You can easily switch that Kyogre out, bring in something like your Kartana, just let it sit in front of these 2 Pokemon that can't do too much damage to it, and then switch it back in, get that Rain up, and boost yourself later for that Hurricane.
I mean, that's the thing. Trick Room's up, but the Groudon is gone, and that was a good time for Venusaur getting the Protect, getting Trick Room up, and now obviously the Rain disappearing means those Hurricanes are not going to be 100% effective. But Kyogre has the utility, like you said, to switch out back in and bring that weather back. But looking at the perilous situation that Kyogre and Tornadus are in, the fact that they're both in the red HP zone means they may not be hanging around long enough for that Hurricane to be able to connect. So Tornadus probably in a position where it can just go for it anyway. Foul Play is first of all going to have to connect into it. It is going to be able to get the KO on it though. So now Caio is going to be, attacked by both Pokemon. Venusaur able to follow up with the Earth Power thanks to the Trick Room environment and get the knockout on Kyogre. Caio's now suddenly, in a shocking turn of events, down to the last 2 remaining Pokemon. Venusaur's having its HP dwindled away by the Life Orb, so it's going to be on its own little ticker at this point. But I think it's going to come down to what this Porygon 2 can get up to.
Yeah, Kartana and, I think the Zacian are the last 2 Pokemon, right? Porygon 2, not happy in front of 2 Pokemon with strong fighting type moves. You can't really recover away, I think, what would be a double target. The Venusaur at this point most likely does not have Sleep Powder. These Life Orb variants oftentimes don't always carry it. So, I think with Venusaur, you're not as threatened by it. It's got the opportunity for Max Quake, which can do some good damage to your Zacian, especially in Trick Room, because you're going to be you're going to be slower in this particular environment. The last Pokemon as well is Incineroar, so you may want to be a little bit more cautious and not taking a knockout, maybe going for a Protect this turn just to continue to stall these turns out, and make sure that Incineroar, if it does comes in later or comes in when it can take damage, because at least Incineroar has the opportunity to get a knockout with a Flare Blitz during any one of these Trick Room turns it can take advantage of, and you'll see Venusaur switching out here for that Incineroar instead. Incineroar definitely is a Pokemon that can make far more use of this Trick Room. This Intimidate onto these 2 physical attackers will help to keep that Porygon 2 comfortable, and will continue to add that threat of that Flare Blitz. Even without the sun, the fact that there's no rain now thanks to Kyogre getting knocked out is a huge boon to Jiseok, and Porygon 2 going for that recover brings it almost all the way back up to full HP as it gets hit by a Sacred Sword from Zacian.
Yeah, it needed that extra HP as it gets actually double Sacred Sworded up, and it is going to be able to survive. So the recovery really paying off there. I was curious whether Porygon 2 was going to go for the Foul Play or possibly switch out for that Incineroar, but we actually saw it come in for that Venusaur that's now going to be hiding in the back. Incineroar critically throwing down the Intimidate against both of these Pokemon can now apply Fake Out pressure, but I think if I was that Incineroar, I'd want to get off the field with a Parting Shot. Just keep negating the damage output that both Kartana or the Zacian can go for. A great alternative though is, hey, why lower their attack when you can deal damage and pick up a KO? Incineroar just goes straight into the Kartana. We saw in game 1 or game, I think it was game 1 or game 2, I'm not sure how much that Flare Blitz can deal to the opposing Kartana, and Porygon 2 using Trick Room and the speed advantage it has got to go for these recovers. It only has to contend with 1 Sacred Sword now as well, which is clearly not going to be enough to pick up the KO against it, and the Sacred Sword going into the Incineroar anyway that's still able to hang on. I mean, fantastic play from the Incineroar here, just being able to get to this end game position where you're against 2 extremely strong and offensive Pokemon, and Incineroar can just deal with both of them.
Yeah, I think Jiseok really kind of piloted his way, right? That Protect with the Venusaur to get you into Trick Room was definitely the smart right play to make. Zacian gonna have to Protect here, maybe gonna have to go for a double. Flare Blitz from the Incineroar as well isn't able to do enough damage or any damage into that Protect. Foul Play as well, not being able to get that damage off. You're facing down 3 Pokemon that are not really very, very healthy besides this Porygon 2, but Porygon 2 you can take in a fight if you're stuck against it. So Porygon 2's main purpose in this is to keep the speeds on the tier that Jiseok wants to have. So switching out Incineroar here, you're going to at least send your Venusaur in. You may be trying to get that Venusaur to be the one to take the damage, then you can bring your Incineroar in back later, which may actually have been the target that Caio went for, because instead of targeting into that Porygon 2, you're targeting into the attacker. Venusaur, though, does get knocked out. You are going to force this Incineroar to come back in after this Trick Room has gone up. It may be able to get a knockout onto this Zacian thanks to that Flare Blitz, but without the Sun, it might be a little bit tougher, and it may just knock itself out with the recoil thanks to how little HP it has left. So your bet may be at this point to let it hit you with that Flare Blitz instead of maybe going for something like a Parting Shot, or just getting that Sacred Sword off if you can, and then just trying to stall this Porygon out, because Porygon's got Foul Play, so it can go for those moves in Trick Room, but once Trick Room is over, it's not going to want to be in an environment without it, and just kind of seeing how much it can recover versus how much damage you can do.
Yeah, that's the thing. I like the switch here. You're sacrificing your Venusaur, but it's allowing your Incineroar to come in after Trick Room's been reset up. And you can see the station just going straight for the Protect here. Pretty wise when you know it's a fake out coming. Again, really easy play here from Jiseok, just going for that fake out, going for the foul play. Of course, foul play not going to be dealing, you know, massive damage to the opposing Zacian, but it's still going to be enough to contend with. There's not a lot that the Zacian can do to the Porygon 2 at this point, particularly if it's in a position where Porygon 2 can get a cheeky recover, then go for a foul play, recover, foul play. And Incineroar is going to be able to go for this Flare Blitz. You know, you mentioned that the sun's no longer in the sky, but it's still going to hurt and do a huge chunk to Zacian. That should surely be more than enough for that Porygon 2 to be able to deal with it with foul play. But I think it's going to come down to how much damage the Zacian can do in retaliation.
Yeah, foul play into the Zacian. It is not enough. I think you can take maybe one more and getting the Sacred Sword off, right? But now here's your problem, because Porygon 2 can get this off before you can. You can go for the Protect, but if you Protect, Porygon's just going to recover. And seeing how much damage that you did with that Sacred Sword, thanks to those Intimidates that have been cycled through, I think you're kind of in a little bit of a losing game here, because Porygon can just go for recover. It can go for a foul play on the next turn. It's going to take multiple Sacred Swords. It's still got the Trick Room up at this point as well. There is a timer heading down, right? So we already saw the 3-minute timer come up. They're getting pretty close. The your time on Caio's side, or sorry, on Jiseok's side, is only at 1:45. So he's kind of running low on time here. He does need to at least make sure that he clicks his moves without running out of time. As long, you know, in case Caio maybe tries to stall him out. We've hit the 2-minute timer as well. So even if you go for something like this timer stall just to fully ensure it, I think Jiseok has the opportunity to just click recover after taking as much time with his moves as he can, just in case to confirm that there is no critical hit. Zacian going for Protect here just to stall out another turn of Trick Room, but there will be a recovery from this Porygon 2 just to try and stall, make sure there's no funky critical hit, you know, shenanigans that allow for this Zacian to take the end game.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's always interesting when speed control starts playing a role. Not speed control, just timer control, I suppose. I guess when I talk about speed is how quickly you click your moves in at the end of a particular game, because, you know, the clock is something you do have to keep an eye on, and, you know, your my time is critical, but so is the entire match time, and we can see the notification flashing up that we are in these last couple of moments of the match, and Porygon 2 needs to keep its health as its priority at this point as the match kind of dwindles out. Foul play, I think another one, if it does connect onto that Zacian, is going to be able to get the KO against it.
Yeah, and I mean, we're getting really low on time. We're at the final 60 seconds. So you can go for something like that foul play, and you will be pretty comfortable, I think, as long as there's no critical hit. You get a Protect failure from that double Protect from Zacian. So I think this foul play connecting is now probably the end of the game, and it is. So I think at that point, right, if you were the Zacian, you were hoping for a double Protect, and then you wanted to go for your own Sacred Sword when you were faster, and hope that you would get a critical hit to lower that HP so that you ended up having more HP at the end. But I think it was still a really interesting endgame. Those ones always wrap up in a way that, you know, my brain gets really tired after I do this kind of matches, because I'm like, how does everything work? What's, you know, like it brings me back to differential equations in college, and in a way that is not, you know, friendly to my brain or my anxiety. But I think it's still a really interesting endgame between these two players, because even though it felt at some points it felt like Caio was in the driver's seat, Jiseok at least had those steps planned out in his head of how he was going to progress the game in a way that was favorable to him and the outcome that he desired.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like when you're reading one of those like crime thriller novels, and it's like, who done it? What happened? I'm so confused. Who am I
The
supposed
second
to
person they
suspect?
talk to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like the second Pokemon to move, like gets the match, and it is that kind of match that does keep you on your toes. And like you say, it's hard work for us on our side, but obviously for the players as well. Really trying to calculate what's obviously happened, the information you revealed, the damage, the speed that has already been revealed, and the information you can then use going forward. It's certainly something that's difficult to do. And huge credits to both of our players here, but I have to commend Jiseok for the way that he was able to navigate that, and obviously I believe now takes the win for South Korea.
He does, yeah. Actually, you're right. That is now they have 4-0'd Brazil. Very similar to last year, where it was, like I said, that 6-1 result. But that means that South Korea is another step closer to at least matching the result of top 4 from last year, and most likely hoping to surpass that, maybe get on and be the winners for this year's World Cup with probably one of the most stacked rosters that the entire World Cup has.
Exactly. Well, we've got one more match on today's broadcast, so we're going to have a short break, but don't go anywhere. It's going to be amazing.